Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter with Ask a Crafter, flying solo this week. I mentioned it like probably 100 times that I have jury duty this month, actually starting tomorrow. So I'm just trying to get a few videos done before I go and serve. So hopefully next week or maybe the week after I'll have Kathy and Lorraine back with me. Lorraine is actually going to be in town a little longer than we originally thought. She's leaving to go down south in February, so we might get her on a few more shows, which would be totally awesome. And Kathy's available too, except I just needed to get this done today while I had a few moments. And because I knew I was going to be reading the questions myself, I thought, oh, I need to make a teleprompter. So that's how I wasted most of my morning coming up with this contraption, which it actually does work if you have like a tablet or a smartphone. I downloaded an app and everything, and I couldn't find it when it was on my tablet. I'm clueless, I'm telling you. I'm like, what am I doing? I need to just focus. And then I go and I Google easy teleprompter app, and there's one that's right there on the computer on the internet you can use, and it was just like easy, and my computer's right there and I could just read words. This is what I wanted to do in the first place 2 hours ago when I started the teleprompter project. But anyway, I can read your questions. Isn't that great? Oh, another thing I want to let you know, I am starting a craft storage series on my YouTube channel and blog this month. And basically what I'm going to do, it's actually in lieu of the craft room tour I do every year. I figured my room doesn't really change that much, and I can't really show you what's in every drawer and how I store every little thing because the videos just get way too long. They're like 40 minutes just me going around and giving an overview. So I figured I'll just kind of like do a video on how I store my beading supplies, how I store my rubber stamps, how I store my paper, how I store my embellishments, things like that. So if you have anything you want to see how I store specifically, leave a comment and I'll just add it to the list of videos. It's going to be like a series of shorter videos. So like instead of doing just like all rubber stamping supplies, which would be, you know, stamps, inks, papers, embellishments, I'd break it up and just do stamps, then do papers. Then, because I mean, some scrapbookers might want to see how I store my papers but not my stamps. I'm going to try to keep it so that you don't have to watch the entire series if you just want to see a couple little things. So hopefully that is useful to you guys, and hopefully I can get it done along with my civic duty of jury duty. Duty. That's how I feel about this whole thing. No, just kidding. I'm happy to help. I just hope I don't get on some gross, icky case. Oh, come on, white collar crime. All right, so let's get going with our first question. Joan asks, do you have a recipe for envelope glue similar to Ranger's Glue and Seal? Actually, I do. 2 parts Elmer's glue or any white glue is fine. 1 part white vinegar. Just shake it up in a bottle, and you can use a Q-tip, like a cotton swab, to apply it to your envelope flaps. That works perfect. And if you want to flavor it, you can add like a peppermint oil or any other like candy flavorings that you may have in your cupboard in your kitchen. They will work just fine. So you paint it on, you let it dry, and then after it's dry, you can moisten that flap and stick it shut. So it just works just like a regular envelope. So that works really well. It's very inexpensive, and it will keep a long time, just, you know, as long as you keep it in a sealed container. And when I press my little button, my words go on my computer, so it's pretty fancy. Enjoy Scrappin' 2 Wonders. Where do you get inexpensive ink for your printer? I've talked about this a lot, actually, but I will go over it again. I have an HP PhotoSmart, and it takes an HP O2 cartridge, and I get a 6-pack of those for $5 on Amazon. But what you want to do when you're looking for your ink is, like, say you have a Canon blah, blah, blah. You want to search that printer's name, and then the words generic ink or generic ink cartridges or off-brand ink. So those are the keywords that are going to find those remanufactured cartridges. It seems like most of the ones I get are brand new, but they don't have like the HP embossing on it. They're manufactured by another company completely, but they work just as well. I haven't noticed an issue with my ink migrating or fading. I did have an issue a long time ago. I had an older HP printer which only took the 2 cartridges. It took a black and it took a tricolor, and I got a great off-brand one at Staples. It was like, you know, 20 bucks versus 50 bucks or something. And then I went and bought another one just like it, and all the ink migrated like within a week. Like all the blacks had kind of like a bloom around them. It was awful. And I did take it back, and they gave me credit towards another HP cartridge. And then it was years before I tried off-brand again. But for some reason, this on Amazon was working really well. And there's several sellers on there that sell it. I buy it from different people each time, it seems like, but I haven't had a bad experience with this, and I think part of it might be because with the HPO2 cartridges, the print heads are not on the ink cartridge, the print heads are on the machine. I think that's why the machine is so great. I've had that, this is going, I think it's 5 years I've had that printer, and it's still printing as good as the day I got it, but the print heads are in the machine and not on the ink cartridge, so I think that keeps the price down for the ink cartridges. Yours probably will not be, you know, 6 for $5, but it should be quite a bit less than what you're paying at Staples or, you know, your office supply store, Walmart, or wherever you go. All right, DLS Pinks ask, what is a substitute for Tim Holtz alcohol blending solution? Well, this is an easy one. You can actually use regular rubbing alcohol for the polished stone techniques and the other blending techniques. You can use denatured alcohol if you want to really dilute it down. Denatured alcohol is a little bit stronger, but either of those are going to work just fine. Leela from Toronto writes, I got hooked on your paper beads. Hooked, she said, with like 5 exclamation points. I have a disability and it helps me to overcome some of my shortcomings, and I thank you for that. I have a question. I hope you can help me with. I would like to make some income selling my beads, or selling some jewelry like necklaces or bracelets or earrings made with them. I've checked Etsy, but they don't seem to be very popular there. Could you help me find some places that I could sell these? Craft fairs are out because I use a wheelchair and I wouldn't be able to get in and around the stalls. Do you have any other ideas? Well, yeah, sure. I think that what you need to do is think about who would want to wear jewelry made with paper beads. They have some really distinct advantages. The big advantage is that they're lightweight. You could use them with ribbons and cloth cords or leather cords and make completely metal-free jewelry for people with metal allergies. And there are a lot of people with metal allergies out there. They're not going to be the best for young children because if they wash their hands, they get them soaked. You know, they have to be somewhat careful with them, so definitely more for adults. But I think you could find a nice market for them at like a senior center or probably like, I know craft fairs are going to be very hard, but if you have a friend that could help you set up, it really wouldn't be that bad to do a craft fair as long as there is access and good parking for you. I know that's something I always look for when I'm doing a craft fair, that there's great parking and it's going to be easy for me to unload my stuff, because while I don't have a disability at all, I do have 3 children and they often like to come with me and help, so it's always a concern that I have good parking and close to the venue. So, you know, you can do a little homework that way. Generally, selling beads just as beads are not going to be as profitable because it's, you know, people are looking to get a really low price. You know, your work is going to be compared against what you could find at a craft store, which is made, you know, in factories and stuff, so it's really hard. But there is a YouTuber called Beyond Bracelets that makes paper beads to sell. She might have some good advice for you too, so go check her out. She has some wonderful tutorials too. I think you'd really enjoy them. If you like the few paper bead ones I've made, you're going to love what she has to offer. All right. Oh, I got a really wonderful long comment from blog reader Chris a few weeks ago. She's getting into crafts and she's 50 years old, and she told me that. It's not a secret. She told me because she feels like she's starting too late. She's excited about everything. She's tried pottery and lots of other different crafts, but she's wondering what direction to go in. She's also lacking supplies, and she wants advice on how she can stock a craft room, kind of like I have. So I can give you some advice on these different questions you have. As far as stocking a craft room, I've been painting since I was a child. I've been taking lessons since I was 5, from when I was 5 to 13, so I've always been collecting. I have the brushes, my first watercolor brushes I got when I was 7. I have some ebony pencils and colored pencils from when I was 5. So, I mean, when I pick something, when I choose it, I look at it as an investment, and I want to pick things that are going to be useful in the long haul. Obviously, you're going to run out of paints and, you know, paper and consumables, but you want to make sure that you make wise choices with your money. As far as where to start, now this kind of all wraps up together, so I'm going to jump around a bit. Where to start? I would say, like, ask yourself, what would I want to do more than anything? Okay, and pick one thing to begin with, because I see this happen quite a bit where you have, you know, somebody jumps into a craft, let's say scrapbooking, because that was so popular a couple years ago, and they go out and they buy everything they could possibly want. They buy paper, they buy albums, they buy punches, they buy decorative scissors, they buy this and that, and everything they see in tutorials and everything they see that their friends have, and they get it all home. and they forget what they bought it for. They forget what to do with it. They feel bad because they spent so much money, and they also feel like they don't want to waste it because it was so expensive. So I recommend starting small. So there are a lot of crafts that you can get into that don't involve a big outlay of cash. For instance, if you wanted to take up knitting, there's a couple things. I don't know if I'd recommend this right off the bat, but I have the Denise interchangeable needles, crochet hooks, and knitting needles, and they are great because you get most of your sizes in one kit, and you can add lengths on them to have long needles or short needles or circular needles. So they are wonderful, but they're about 50 or 60 bucks a set. So it's cheaper than buying all your needles individually. But if you decide you want to try knitting and you buy a set of needles and you buy some yarn and you knit your first scarf and you realize this is not for me, at least you're only out about 10 bucks this way as opposed to investing in a big set like that. So like if it's something like knitting, you could buy some yarn you really love, buy a pair of needles. A lot of times the yarn will have a pattern on it, and it's usually a pretty easy pattern. I would try that and then slowly add onto it. Look for another pattern you want to make, buy the supplies for that pattern, and then you just keep adding onto it until you've built up a stash. And that's a really that's a pretty easy hobby to get into. If you wanted to do some more pottery or ceramics where the equipment's very expensive, I would go to a pottery studio. Oops, hold on one moment. That was my phone. Woo, professional studio, I got a prompter. I need one of those flashers. No, that really wouldn't work because then you just see a flashing strobe light when my phone rang. I used to work in radio, and like whenever the phone rang, it would be this flashing strobe light so that, you know, you could turn off your microphone and answer the phone. But it's a professional outfit I've got going here. Anyways, basketball practice is running late tonight. Just thought I'm probably gonna get 2 more calls from my other 2 kids that are in basketball. Oh boy. But anyway, so like if you wanted to get into ceramics, I do not recommend you go out and buy a pottery wheel and a kiln and glazes. I mean, that's just such a high entry level craft. I would go to a studio. Sometimes your local university will have adult enrichment classes. Adult ed is a great place to start. Like my mom and my sister take quilting class every Monday night through adult ed, and they love it. And it's just, you know, it's a way to get out with other people, try a different craft. If you get into it and decide you're not crazy about it, you haven't invested in so much stuff because you can share. So I would really recommend that too, because I think a lot of the things that we really love about crafting is getting together with other people and sharing. And that's how I got into scrapbooking. It was kind of like, well, I love to paint and I love to draw, but there aren't groups of people that do this together. So if you can't beat them, join them. And so I started scrapbooking at a store, and I loved it. I loved being with the other people and sharing. And I think that's kind of when these waves of crafts get popular, like jewelry making. You know, the little stores will pop up. Go to them, enjoy, buy the supplies there. It's not going to be that expensive. Take the little classes and, you know, enjoy that whole community and everything that goes around with it. And that's a way that you're not going to waste money, because, like, for instance, going into a class where you can share tools such as like a scrapbooking crop, if you go and you just have your cardstock and your photos because you're just starting, you can borrow people's punches. People are happy to share their stamps and their punches and their die cutting machines because it doesn't take anything away from them, and it gives so much to somebody else, and then they feel better about what they bought because they're helping other people, and, you know, their materials are getting used more. So join a group, see what you really love, take a class. Usually you'll save money, I think, doing something like that, like taking a class and seeing if you really like it. Start out slow. Don't try to fill a room like this in a weekend. This has taken me 30 years to fill, and you know, not that I've always lived here, but you know, it's a slow progression. And also, yard sales are great for finding crafty bargains. I'm always on the lookout. If somebody goes to a yard sale and they see that there's like a lot of yarn or stamps, I get a phone call and I go over and I check it out. So, you know, always tell your friends that you're looking for stuff. Facebook is great if you do social media. You know, type in a post, hey, I'm starting up scrapbooking. Does anybody know where I can find some good deals? Or does anybody have some supplies they're looking to get rid of or they want to sell? A lot of times people are just trying to unload it, but they feel bad because they spent so much money on it, so they hang on to it because they feel too guilty to throw it away or to give it away. So a lot of times you can find materials that way. A lot of the materials in my craft room have been cast-offs. I've joked before that this is the island of misfit craft supplies because, like, a lot of the stencils in my stencil binder back here were given to me. People get into a hobby and they tire of it and they, you know, they get rid of the materials. And I teach a lot of kids classes, so I like to have that stuff ready so I can bring it out with me, and, you know, stuff I might not necessarily even use myself, I'll hang on to for kids classes. If I didn't teach, I probably would get rid of a lot of the things that I have here that I don't really use that much for myself. But I am, I don't say a hoarder, but I think most of us creative people, we can think of so many ways to use everything that we're afraid to get rid of anything. And don't you hate it when you get rid of something and then next week you're like, oh, I wish I had that because I had the best idea for it? That always happens to me when I get rid of something. So that's going to be another reason I think that the storage craft video series is going to be good, because I think you guys are a lot like me. I mean, we pay good money for things. We don't want to just throw it away when the next new trendy thing comes out. And plus, everything comes back. I just heard the Craft and Hobby Association show's coming up this weekend, and one of the trends that's coming back is scrapbooking like it is in the 90s, like with the, you know, very simple, very basic. And we have all those supplies because that's when a lot of us started. So it's funny to see the trends come back and to see old tools be used different ways. So yeah, start slow so you know exactly what your materials will do. Even if you're like, you know, drawing and you buy some colored pencils, you don't really use them. You know, focus on that one material for a while, see what they can do before you go buy a box of pastels to go with it. You know, add on slowly and you'll find that you use your materials more and that you're more knowledgeable about what they can do. I do have a little more time here, so I'm going to grab some questions out of the jar because I did use up what I had in my prompter, my fancy operation. We'll call this the fancy operation show, Lindsay's fancy operation Ask a Crafter. By the way, if you do have questions, make sure you leave them below because I was going through and I am finally catching up with all the questions. Julie Blake has a question. When do you decide that a product is cheap enough to buy? For example, say a product is expensive, but it takes a lot of effort to copy it. Do you go ahead and make it or buy it or do without? Or if the project is cheap to buy but also easy to copy, do you still go ahead and make your own? Well, I'm lazy and I don't like to leave my house, so I would probably try making my own if it's something I really needed. Like, you know, texture paste or whatever. That's pretty easy to make on your own. Just I use silicone caulking for that. But, you know, I spent the morning making a teleprompter, so I'm probably not the person to ask. I always try to make it first, or try to find a less expensive alternative. And then sometimes I do end up buying the real McCoy because I really like what the cheaper version did, and I wanted to try the real deal. Like for instance, pan pastels. I went out and I tried to make my regular pastels work like pan pastels by wetting them with a sponge and applying them, and they did look a lot like pan pastels when I did that. And then I thought, well, I bet they're a lot like eyeshadow. So we went and bought this huge palette of eyeshadow, and it was really fun to paint with and play with. But then when I looked at like the contents in that huge palette of eyeshadow versus one little pot of pan pastels, there was actually more content in the pot of pan pastel than in the entire thing of eyeshadow, even though I got a rainbow and it was nice to have that variety. So then that kind of made me think, you know what, in the long run it actually would be cheaper for me to buy like a set of the painting pan pastels, which is what I got because they're all the pure colors. And I mean, I haven't even made a dent, and I think that's really going to go quite a long ways. So I kind of go in stages. I like to try it out. I like to try before I buy, I guess. And also, if it's a company I feel really passionate about and I really want to see that company succeed because they're innovative, like, oh, it's funny, like like the gelatin plate, the jelly plate. I had done gelatin printmaking probably about 15 years ago. Actually, yeah, somewhere around there. I loved it. It was so much fun. So then when the jelly plate came out, I remembered how much I enjoyed it, but I thought, well, I wonder if I can make, then I made a jelly plate, played with it. I'm like, I wonder if I can make a permanent one. So then I did some research and learned about hectographs and made a permanent one. But I'm so in love with how innovative that company is that I had a Blick order coming up, and it was one of those deals where I had a 25% off coupon if I spent $100, and I was like, I don't know, $10 away or something. So I added the jelly plate on, and then it brought my order down to less than what it was to begin with, and I got that jelly plate, and I had so much fun playing with that. So, you know, there's that to factor in too. If a company is so innovative that you find you're constantly inspired by them, then I'd like to kick a few bucks their way and buy their product. So I guess I do all these different ways. I don't think there's this definite cutoff point. I always try to just come up with my own way first before I go out and buy, because I don't like to leave the house. It's very inconvenient for me. I live out in the country, or wait for the UPS guy. It's always quicker for me to make it myself. So, and I love to do it. It's fun. I love experimenting and learning new things. So I think that plays a really big part in it too. I think anytime we can learn and be creative, it just helps our brains stay young and supple and active. And yeah, that's about it. I want to thank you so much for your questions. Leave them below so I'll have something to answer next week. And until next time, happy crafting.